I think I'd like to turn around, head for Texarkana here. I've got a little problem. That is the last coherent radio transmission from a Douglas DC-3 over northeast Texas on New Year's Eve, 1985. The pilot's voice is calm, conversational. A man reporting a scheduling inconvenience, not a catastrophe. The controller provides a radar vector and a list of nearby airports. 3 minutes later, the same voice comes back. Different register. Smoke in the cockpit. Have smoke in the cockpit. Then nothing. No further transmissions. No distress call. No mayday. The radio goes silent at 5:11 p.m. Central Standard Time, and the airplane drops off the conversation like a phone going dead mid-sentence. 3 minutes after that, the DC-3 is in a cow pasture 2 miles short of a landing strip near Kalb, Texas. It has clipped a utility pole. It has torn through a wire fence. It has plowed into a stand of trees. The fuselage is intact. The wings are intact. The engines are still attached. This is, by the standards of forced landings, survivable. The two pilots crawl out through the cockpit windows. They are burned. They are alive. They turn back to the cabin and shout. Nothing. No movement. No voices. No one comes out. 7 people are still inside. They did not die on impact. They were consumed by the smoke and fire that filled the cabin while the aircraft was still in the air and continued to burn after it stopped rolling. By the time the fuselage came to rest, the passengers had been crawling toward the cockpit. None of them reached it. The Dallas County Medical Examiner will determine the cause of death: smoke inhalation and thermal burns. Not blunt force trauma. Not impact deceleration. Smoke. Fire. One of the 7 is a 45-year-old man with a face that 60 million Americans watched grow up on television. He was the first teenager in history to become a rock and roll star without ever leaving his living room. He charted 53 hits on the Billboard Hot 100. He was second only to Elvis Presley as the best-selling rock and roll artist of the late 1950s. His name is Eric Hilliard Nelson. The world knew him as Ricky. Ricky Nelson is lying in the wreckage of a 41-year-old airplane that was built as a military C-47 Skytrain in 1944. He bought it 8 months ago for $118,000. It had belonged to the DuPont family. It had belonged to Jerry Lee Lewis. Its engine had failed in flight 6 months earlier. Its heater had been malfunctioning for weeks. And on this New Year's Eve, the heater finished what the maintenance log started. Within 72 hours, the tabloids will have their version. A rock star and a substance and a fire that writes its own headline. The story is irresistible. It is also wrong. The National Transportation Safety Board will spend 18 months investigating. They will find a cracked fuel line leading to a gasoline-powered cabin heater, though they will not be able to determine whether it cracked before the fire or during the forced landing. They will find fasteners on the heater access door unfastened. They will find a captain who did the opposite of every step on the in-flight fire checklist. And they will find a co-pilot who told investigators that the captain said, after both men escaped the burning aircraft, "Don't tell anyone about the heater." The captain disputes this. 7 people are dead. Not because of what the tabloids printed, because a gasoline-powered heater from the Second World War malfunctioned inside an unpressurized aluminum tube at 6,000 feet, and the flight crew did not follow the emergency checklist designed to keep the passengers alive. This is not a drug story. This is a thermodynamics story. And the thermodynamics were 41 years old. Eric Hilliard Nelson first appeared on American broadcast at the age of 8, on his parents' radio show in 1949. By the time the show moved to television in 1952, he was 12. His parents, Ozzie and Harriet, had built the most successful family brand in American entertainment, a fictionalized version of their own lives, broadcast weekly into 60 million living rooms. At 16, Ricky picked up a guitar. The story is that he did it to impress a girl. Whether that is true or not does not matter. What matters is that Ozzie Nelson, who ran the show like a business because it was one, recognized the commercial potential immediately. He put Ricky on the show performing a cover of Fats Domino's "I'm Walkin'" in April 1957. The single sold 1 million copies. Ricky Nelson had a captive audience of 60 million people every week, and he used it. He did not need radio. He did not need a promoter. He walked from the living room set to the soundstage, sang a song, and the next morning it was on the charts. Between 1957 and 1963, he charted 53 singles on the Billboard Hot 100. "Poor Little Fool" hit number 1. "Travelin' Man" hit number 1. His guitarist was James Burton, who would later play for Elvis himself. Ricky Nelson was not a novelty act. He was a rock and roll artist who happened to have a television show attached to him like a second skin. The skin became a cage. The British invasion landed in 1964 and buried the first generation of American rock and roll. Nelson kept recording. He formed the Stone Canyon Band with Randy Meisner, who would go on to co-found the Eagles. He was making country rock before anyone had a name for it. Nobody cared. The industry had filed him under oldies. On October 15, 1971, Nelson appeared at a Richard Nader concert at Madison Square Garden alongside Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, and Bobby Rydell. He walked on stage with long hair, a purple velvet shirt, and cowboy boots. He played "Hello, Mary Lou." The crowd was fine. Then he played a country arrangement of the Rolling Stones' "Honky Tonk Women." The crowd booed. Whether they were booing him or a drunk being dragged out by police has been debated for 50 years. Nelson took it personally. He finished his set and walked off stage. Then he went home and wrote "Garden Party." It reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1972. It was the last top 40 hit of his career. The next 13 years were a slow grind downward. MCA Records did not know what to do with him. His albums underperformed. He played Knott's Berry Farm. He played Disneyland. He took minor television roles. A brutal divorce from Kristen Harmon left him financially gutted. By the early 1980s, Ricky Nelson was a man who had been famous since childhood and had almost nothing to show for it except the name. In 1985, he decided to come back. He added the Y back to his name, Ricky, not Rick, because his management told him it would sell more tickets. He signed a new deal with MCA Curb Records. He assembled a new Stone Canyon Band, lead guitarist Bobby Neal, bassist Patrick Woodward, drummer Rick Intveld, and keyboardist Andy Chapin, a former member of Steppenwolf. He went on the road with Fats Domino, playing his old hits. He was on the road 250 nights a year. He was 45 years old, and he was grinding. He needed a plane. He hated flying. But the math was simple. A man playing 250 dates a year cannot afford 12 hours on a highway between shows. In May 1985, Nelson paid $118,000 for a Douglas DC-3, registration N711Y, painted white with gold and black trim. 14 executive seats, built in 1944 as a C-47 Skytrain, the same airframe that Douglas built over 10,000 of to win the Second World War. In 1985, hundreds were still flying. But a 41-year-old airplane is not a museum piece if you fly it 250 nights a year. It is a working machine. And a working machine requires maintenance. The maintenance log on N711Y reads like a countdown. The aircraft was never re-registered under Nelson's name. On June 4th, 5 weeks after purchase, an engine failed in flight. The pilots made an unscheduled landing in Lancaster, California. The NTSB investigator, Francis Scherertz, noted that the captain directed the co-pilot to check the circuit breakers for a low oil pressure indication. DC-3 oil pressure gauges are not dependent on circuit breakers. The captain did not appear to understand the systems of the aircraft he was flying. On a separate occasion, the band was enlisted to push the airplane off the runway by hand after another engine failure. In September, a malfunctioning ignition magneto grounded the aircraft. Nelson missed the first Farm Aid concert. On September 20th, the DC-3 flew Nelson to Memphis for a recording session with Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, Roy Orbison, and Carl Perkins, the Class of '55 session, produced by Sam Phillips and Chips Moman. After the session, Nelson tried to fly several guests to Indiana for a Farm Aid rehearsal. The plane broke down again. Johnny Cash's guitarist Marty Stewart arrived at the runway just in time to watch the DC-3 rumble off without him. Stewart did not get on the plane. He was fortunate. Bobby Neal's wife, Phyllis, urged him not to board the airplane. Bassist Patrick Woodward told his wife Jody about the emergency landings. She later recalled his exact words. He said he was going to die in that airplane, and he said it seriously. Andy Chapin's sister-in-law said Chapin told her it was a bad plane, that all the guys in the band felt the same way. Clark Russell's wife, Lori, said she hated the plane because every time he went on it, she thought it would be the last time. They all got back on. December 26, 1985. Nelson and the band leave for a 3-stop tour. Orlando, Guntersville, Alabama. Then a New Year's Eve show at the Park Suite Hotel in Dallas. On the night of December 30th in Guntersville, Nelson closes his set with Buddy Holly's Rave On. He has been recording Holly's True Love Ways for his upcoming album, finishing the track just days earlier. The last song Ricky Nelson ever performs live is a Buddy Holly song. December 31st. The morning of. The flight crew intends to depart Guntersville Municipal Airport at 10 o'clock. There is a problem with the airplane, a fuel primer issue. Guntersville Airport manager Dick Lusk will later describe it as minor. They had a little primer problem, that's all. The repair delays departure by 4 hours. Nelson and his party wait in the airport terminal, playing video games and eating lunch. Soundman Clark Russell leaves a briefcase in the airport office. They go back for it. At approximately 2 o'clock, 9 people board N711Y. Captain Brad Rank, 34. Co-pilot Kenneth Ferguson, 40. Ricky Nelson, 45. Helen Blair, his fiancée, 28. Bobby Neal, 38. Patrick Woodward, 35. Andy Chapin, 33. Rick Intveld, 22. Clark Russell, 35. The destination is Love Field, Dallas. Flight time is approximately 3 hours. The aircraft climbs to 6,000 feet. In the tail of the aircraft, a gasoline-fueled combustion heater is acting up. The co-pilot, Ferguson, will later tell the NTSB that the captain went to the back of the plane multiple times to try to fix it, and that he repeatedly told Ferguson to turn it on. Ferguson will say that at one point he refused. The NTSB will find the fasteners on the heater access door unfastened. A gasoline combustion heater draws aviation fuel through a dedicated line, ignites it inside a sealed combustion chamber, and blows the resulting heat into the cabin through ducts. The combustion gases vent overboard through an exhaust stack. The cabin air and the combustion gases are never supposed to mix. The system has 3 points of failure: a cracked fuel line, a breached combustion chamber, or a loose access door that lets combustion gases and raw fuel leak into the passenger cabin. On N711Y, the NTSB found 2 of the 3. The fasteners on the heater access door were unfastened, and a cracked fuel line leading to the heater was recovered. NTSB Chairman Jim Burnett stated publicly that the line was transported to the laboratory. They could not determine whether it cracked before the fire or on impact. But the fire originated on the right side of the aft cabin area, at or near the floor line, exactly where the heater was mounted. Not mid-cabin, not in a passenger seat. At the floor line, where the heater lived. Within days of the crash, newspapers reported that freebasing cocaine was among several possible causes. The story gained traction because Richard Pryor had suffered severe burns doing the exact same thing in 1980, because toxicology tests found small amounts of metabolized cocaine in Nelson's system, and because rock star's drug habit causes plane fire, sells more newspapers than faulty heater in 41-year-old aircraft. The physical evidence contradicts it. The illicit chemical process the tabloids described produces a localized flash fire, centered entirely on the individual. It does not produce a fire that originates at the floor line of the aft cabin, in the exact location of the fuel-burning heater, following hours of documented heater malfunction. The FAA's forensic toxicologist, Dr. Delbert Lacefield, stated that the tests showed no evidence of when the cocaine was used or how it was administered. The NTSB discounted the tabloid theory entirely. The fire started in the floor, not in a seat. When the access door came loose, the fire triangle became uncontrolled. Raw fuel met open flame met cabin air, and the fire was loose in the fuselage. A fire inside an unpressurized aluminum tube at 6,000 feet follows a specific set of rules. Smoke rises. It fills the cabin from the ceiling down. The breathable air compresses into a shrinking layer near the floor. The passengers crouch. They move toward the cockpit, because the cockpit is forward and the fire is aft. This is precisely what the NTSB found. All 7 bodies at the front of the cabin, near the cockpit partition. Carbon monoxide bonded to hemoglobin, with an affinity roughly 250 times stronger than oxygen. Once it entered the lungs, it locked onto the red blood cells and did not let go. Consciousness faded. Coordination failed. Burning fabrics released hydrogen cyanide. Burning plastics generated hydrochloric acid. The air became poison before the flames reached the skin. The Dallas County Medical Examiner confirmed it. Cause of death was smoke inhalation and thermal burns. They were incapacitated by the smoke and then burned. The impact of the forced landing did not kill them. The checklist existed for exactly this scenario. Close the fresh air vents to starve the fire of oxygen. Activate supplemental oxygen so the passengers can breathe. Deploy the fire extinguisher. Get the aircraft on the ground. Captain Brad Rank opened the fresh air vents, the opposite of Step 1. Ram air pressure from forward flight forced outside air into the cabin, feeding oxygen directly to the flames. He did not activate the supplemental oxygen. He did not deploy the handheld extinguisher. 7 people breathed smoke instead of bottled oxygen because nobody told them the oxygen was there. The board stated it directly. These actions, if taken in a timely manner, would have enhanced the potential for survival of the passengers. That sentence is the NTSB, speaking as carefully as it knows how. Translated from regulatory language into plain English, it means, the passengers might have lived if the captain had followed the checklist. Every pilot who sat in the left seat knew, and knew in 1985, you close the vents in a cabin fire. This was not obscure knowledge. Combustion heater fire risks were documented in FAA Airworthiness Directive 81-09-09, issued in 1981, 4 years before N711Y burned. The directive mandated inspection of fuel lines every 250 hours and full overhaul at 1,000 hours. Pilots and mechanics who worked on these aircraft had known for years. The response to this failure was printed on a laminated card in the cockpit. The card was not followed. The NTSB investigator had already flagged, after the June 1985 engine failure, that the captain appeared unfamiliar with the DC-3's systems. If he did not understand the oil system, did he understand the fire suppression system? The NTSB does not speculate on a pilot's internal state. It documents what was done, what was not done, and what the procedures required. 3 hours and 8 minutes after takeoff. A passenger walks forward and tells the co-pilot there is smoke in the back of the cabin. This is the moment behind the radio call. The little problem that the captain reported to Fort Worth Center at 5:08 p.m. was not little. It was a cabin filling with smoke from the aft section, from the heater that had been malfunctioning since takeoff, from the access door with the unfastened fasteners, from the fuel line that was cracked or cracking. The controller provides vectors to nearby airports. The pilot advises the controller that he will not be able to reach any of them. 3 minutes after the first call, the smoke has pushed forward through the fuselage and reached the cockpit. The aircraft is flying blind from the inside. The radio goes silent. The captain, Rank, will later describe these final minutes to the NTSB. He opens his cockpit window. The situation, in his words, rapidly gets worse. He begins a slow descending turn. The smoke pours through the cabin and stains the cockpit glass, the windshield, everything. He cannot see through the forward windows. He leans his head and upper body through the open cockpit window into the slipstream to find a place to land. He is flying a 30,000-pound twin-engine transport with his head out the window, squinting into the winter light over northeast Texas, looking for a flat piece of ground. Below, witnesses see the DC-3 coming, smoke trailing from the fuselage, small grass fires igniting along the flight path as pieces of hot metal fall from the airplane. The aircraft lines up with a farm field. It flies over a house. It strikes 2 power lines and severs them. It hits a utility pole. The landing gear is down. The DC-3 touches the field and rolls into a stand of trees. 5:14 p.m. 6 minutes since the first radio call. The captain exits through his cockpit window. The co-pilot exits through his. Both men are burned. Both men are alive. They shout toward the passenger cabin. No one answers. The captain opens the aft entrance door and looks inside. There is a small flame in the area where he first noticed smoke. The right side, the aft section, the heater. He backs away. The fire spreads. It consumes the fuselage. It melts the magnesium engine cowlings. By the time it burns out, only the outer wings and the tail surfaces remain. Firefighter Lewis Glover reaches the site. All 7 bodies are at the front of the cabin. His statement is plain. All the bodies are there at the front of the plane. Apparently, they were trying to escape the fire. 7 people: Bobby Neal, 38, Patrick Woodward, 35, the man who told his wife he was going to die in this airplane, Andy Chapin, 33, Rick Intveld, 22, the youngest on board, Clark Russell, 35, Helen Blair, 28. She organized Ricky Nelson's schedule, ran his fan club, and traveled with him everywhere. Her name will not be mentioned at his funeral. And Ricky Nelson, 45, the boy from the television, the voice on the radio, the man who wrote Garden Party because a crowd booed him for refusing to play his oldies, the man who hated flying but bought a 41-year-old airplane because the bus was too slow. Identified by his personal effects, the fire consumed everything else. According to Ferguson's NTSB testimony, after both pilots escaped, the captain told him, "Don't tell anyone about the heater. Don't tell anyone about the heater." The captain denies this. 2 pilots. 2 stories. The NTSB cannot reconcile them. Back at the Park Suite Hotel in Dallas, a 25-foot stage stands empty. 250 suites are occupied. 500 floor seats are filled. The champagne has been ordered. Ricky Nelson will not be performing tonight. At approximately 7:30 p.m., news reports begin to circulate. Harriet Nelson, Ricky's 76-year-old mother, hears the news on her car radio in Los Angeles. No one has called her. She learns that her son is dead from a broadcast. The Associated Press wire moves the story. President Ronald Reagan issues a statement. New Year's Day, 1986. The investigation begins, and the rumors begin with it. Nelson's remains are lost in transit from Texas to California. For several days, the family does not have the body. The funeral is held on January 6, 1986, at the Church of the Hills in Los Angeles. 250 mourners inside, 700 fans outside. Colonel Tom Parker is there, Connie Stevens, Angie Dickinson, dozens of actors, writers, and musicians who grew up watching the Nelson family on television. Helen Blair's name is not spoken at the service. She died in the same fire, in the same airplane, sitting next to the man she loved. Her parents want her buried beside Nelson at Forest Lawn. Harriet Nelson dismisses the idea. The Blairs file a $2 million wrongful death suit. They receive a small settlement. She is erased from his funeral as if she had never existed. Nelson's will, drawn up 4 months before his death, leaves his entire estate to his 4 children. It does not provide for his ex-wife, for Helen Blair, or for his son Eric Crew. The ex-wife challenges it. A Los Angeles judge rejects her bid. 2 weeks after the crash, the Washington Post publishes a front-page headline: "Drug-related fire suspected in Rick Nelson plane crash." The sub-headline qualifies it, one of several possibilities. But the headline is what people read. The headline is what gets clipped and photocopied and pinned to break-room bulletin boards. The headline becomes the story. Other outlets follow. Television news leads with the freebasing angle. The Richard Pryor comparison is made repeatedly. Ricky Nelson, the clean-cut boy next door, the man who sang Travelin' Man, is repackaged overnight by the tabloids as a reckless drug casualty. 18 months later, the NTSB releases its final report. Probable cause: the gasoline-fueled cabin heater. Contributing factors: failure to follow emergency procedures, failure to use the checklist, failure to activate supplemental oxygen. The tabloid theory is discounted. The correction runs as a minor story. It does not undo 18 months of headlines. Pull back. Look at the full chain. Ricky Nelson dies because a gasoline combustion heater malfunctions at 6,000 feet. The heater malfunctions because its fuel line is cracked, or its access door is unfastened, or both. The fuel line is cracked because the heater has not been properly maintained on an aircraft flying 250 nights a year. The aircraft is a 41-year-old DC-3 because Nelson cannot afford a newer airplane. He cannot afford a newer airplane because his career collapsed after 1972 and a divorce stripped him of whatever was left. He is on the road 250 nights a year because the money is gone, and the comeback is the only play he has. He buys the cheapest aircraft that can carry a band, and the cheapest aircraft that can carry a band is a Second World War transport with a gasoline furnace bolted to the floor. The captain does not follow the fire checklist. 7 people breathe smoke instead of clean air and burn instead of walking off the airplane. The forced landing is survivable. The fire response is not. The but-for cause is not the cocaine. It is the heater. But for the heater, the DC-3 lands at Love Field on schedule and Ricky Nelson plays the Park Suite Hotel on New Year's Eve. But for the heater, Bobby Neal goes home to Phyllis, and Patrick Woodward proves his wife wrong, and Rick Intveld gets to turn 23. But the heater was there, and it had been there since 1944. Ricky Nelson was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on January 21, 1987, 13 months after the crash, 4 months before the NTSB report cleared his name. John Fogerty, who had been at the Class of '55 recording session in Memphis just months before the crash, delivered the induction speech. Fogerty had almost boarded the DC-3 that day. He did not. The induction arrived in the gap between the headline and the correction. Nelson entered the Hall of Fame while the public still believed the lie. That pattern held for 40 years. Matthew and Gunnar Nelson, the twin sons who were 18 when their father died, formed the band Nelson. In 1990, their single, Can't Live Without Your Love and Affection, reached #1. The Nelsons became the only family in history to produce #1 records in 3 successive generations. It is the kind of statistic that should define a family's legacy. Instead, the question they are asked most often is about the lie the tabloids printed the next morning. The NTSB report has been a public document for 40 years. None of it matters. The first story is the one that sticks. In Kalb, Texas, the tail section of N711Y hangs from the ceiling of the Williams House Museum. The rest of the airframe is gone. The fuselage, the cockpit, the 14 executive seats, all of it reduced to ash in a cow pasture on New Year's Eve. What remains is the tail, the part of the airplane farthest from the heater, the part that did not burn. The heater burned everything else. This channel does not tell you the story of the song. It investigates the silence that followed it. And the silence that followed Ricky Nelson's death was the silence of a correction that nobody read. Buried on page 9 of a newspaper that ran the accusation on page 1. If the gap between the headline and the truth matters to you, subscribe. Turn on notifications. The heater is in the floor. The truth is in the file. And the file has been sitting there for 40 years, waiting for someone to read it.